Hi, I'm Sophia, a 28-year-old new mom, learning to handle the wonderful but tough world of motherhood. The first few days at home with my newborn son were a mix of happiness and exhaustion, even though he brought so much joy into our lives. Recovering from childbirth was harder than I thought. The house was always messy, with laundry piling up and dishes not getting cleaned. One afternoon, as I was trying to calm my crying baby, the doorbell rang. It was Linda, my mother-in-law, dropping by without warning. She looked around the cluttered living room, her face showing both worry and a bit of disapproval. "I thought I'd check in and see how you're doing, dear," Linda said, stepping over a baby toy. "Tom mentioned you might need some help." "Thanks, Linda. Things are a bit crazy, but we're managing," I said, trying to hide the stress in my voice. Linda walked into the kitchen, and the sound of dirty dishes seemed louder than ever. "It looks like you need more than just a little help," she said sharply. "This place is a mess. Is this how you plan to raise my grandson?" Her words hurt, and I felt even more overwhelmed. "I'm doing the best I can," I replied, holding my son closer. Linda let out a long sigh. "Sophia, being a mom is about setting priorities, and right now, it looks like you're not prioritizing anything." I was about to say something when Tom, my husband, walked in. Seeing the tension, he quickly tried to calm things down. "Mom, Sophia is doing a great job. It's been hard since the baby hasn't been sleeping well." But instead of calming down, Linda turned to Tom. "You need to help her understand what's important. It's not just about cleaning, it's about being responsible. She's not meeting the family's expectations." Tom looked at me, then back at his mom, unsure what to do. "Mom, please, can we not do this right now? Sophia is still recovering." "But this is the time to teach her," Linda said, raising her voice. "If she learns now, she'll handle things better later. You can't go easy on her, Tom." Tom hesitated, then said, "Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Sophia does need to learn the hard way." The words sounded strange as he said them. "Exactly," Linda agreed, gently pushing Tom toward me. "Show her that this kind of behavior isn't okay." I barely had time to react before Tom's hand hit my cheek. The sound echoed in the room, marking a terrible line that had been crossed. I held our son close, his cries blending with the rapid beating of my heart. "Tom, what are you doing?" I managed to say through my tears. The pain from the slap was nothing compared to the feeling of betrayal. "This is for your own good, Sophia. You need to learn," Tom said, his voice empty, avoiding my gaze. The room went quiet except for my baby's soft whimpers. Tom looked at me with a mix of frustration and embarrassment, while Linda stood firm, her expression unreadable but unyielding. What started as a casual visit had turned into a harsh critique of my parenting and my worth. As Linda prepared to leave, she whispered something to Tom at the door. I couldn't hear it all, but her tone and Tom's worried look told me it wasn't supportive. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What should have felt like a supportive family now felt like a trial, and I was the one on trial. As I cared for my son and felt the sting on my cheek, I started to think clearly amid the chaos. I needed a plan, a way out, not just for my safety, but for my little boy's well-being. The house that had once felt like home now felt like a trap set by the very people who were supposed to love us. After Tom slapped me, influenced by Linda, I couldn't stand the thought of sleeping next to him. I took my baby and went to the nursery, which had been a safe space for the past few weeks. As I rocked my son back to sleep, the day's events replayed in my mind, sharpening the pain and betrayal. The next morning, while Tom was at work and Linda was presumably busy, I made a call. Jessica answered on the second ring. "Jess, it's me. I need the help you offered," I said, my voice trembling but determined. "Say no more, Sophia. I'll come by today with my truck. We can store your things at my place until you decide what to do," Jessica replied, her voice strong and reassuring. The plan was simple, but risky. I would pack as much as I could during the day, focusing on what my son and I really needed. Jessica was going to help me move everything to her place in the evening. We decided it was best to leave before Tom came home from work, knowing he might try to sway me with apologies or that Linda's influence might take over again. As I packed, every outfit and baby toy felt heavy with memories and what-ifs, but the memory of Tom's slap and the look in Linda's eyes reminded me that staying was not an option. By late afternoon, most of our things were boxed up and hidden in the garage. Jessica arrived just as the sun began to set, her presence a light of hope on one of the darkest days of my life. "Ready?" she asked, taking in the scene of our life reduced to boxes and bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, holding my son a bit tighter. We worked quickly, loading the truck with the speed and teamwork of a well-oiled machine. The nursery, my safe space, was the last room I cleared. I took a moment there to say a silent goodbye to the life I had hoped to build with Tom. As we drove away from the house, I watched it fade in the rearview mirror, a chapter closing with a heavy but hopeful heart. My baby slept quietly in his seat, unaware of the change, but finally safe. This was the first night of our new life, one where fear and manipulation would no longer have power. At Jessica's place, my resolve grew stronger. The peace and support I found there were a sharp contrast to the tense atmosphere of my own home. In this safe space, I began to plan how to expose Tom and Linda for who they really were. My goal was not just to escape, but to ensure they couldn't twist the story to their advantage or hurt anyone else. I started by reaching out to family and friends under the pretense of catching up. I quietly recorded any mentions of Linda's behavior and Tom's unusual obedience to her. Some family members were cautious, but many didn't realize how much control Linda had. Over the weeks, these pieces of evidence started to create a clearer picture. I collected text messages, voicemails, and recorded calls. I even got a damaging video of Linda coaching Tom on how to handle me, showing it was more about control than concern. With everything in place, I chose the location for the confrontation, a family gathering at Tom's sister's anniversary party. It was a neutral place with enough family members present, some of whom had privately expressed their discomfort with Linda's control. On the day of the gathering, I was extremely nervous. I arrived with Jessica, who agreed to support me. The greetings were polite but lacking warmth. The tension about Tom and Linda's recent issues was felt by even the most distant relatives. After the initial small talk, I stood up, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "I have something important to share with all of you today," I began. Every eye in the room turned toward me. "It's about Tom and his mother, Linda, and how their actions have affected me, my son, and the whole family." Tom looked shocked and scared. "Sophia, let's not do this here." He tried to interrupt, but I pressed on, pulling out my phone. "This isn't just a family issue," I said, connecting my phone to the Bluetooth speaker. The room went quiet as the recordings played, Linda's harsh orders and Tom's hesitant agreements about correcting my behavior. The reactions ranged from shock to disgust. Tom's aunt, who had always liked me, looked especially betrayed. "Is this true, Linda? Were you forcing Tom to do these things?" Linda's face turned to a mask of anger and panic. "These are just taken out of context." She tried to deflect, but then Tom's cousin, who had been quiet until now, stood up. "No, they aren't. We've seen signs of this for years. We just didn't want to believe it." The confrontation changed everything. Relatives began sharing their own experiences, slowly revealing how Linda had manipulated the family under the guise of concern. Tom sat there, pale and silent, finally realizing the web his mother had spun around him. As the family meeting turned into a heated discussion about Linda's control, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, and not just for me. Everyone who had been affected by Linda's toxic influence could now see it. The evening ended with promises of support for me and my son, and a clear message to Linda that her control was no longer welcome. After the confrontation, everyone was left with a quiet, somber realization. Tom's family, long under Linda's sway, now saw her manipulations for what they were. The shock was clear, and everyone felt uncomfortable as they came to terms with how deeply Linda's influence had affected their lives. For me, the decision to leave Tom was painful but necessary. As the family gathering came to an end, the finality of my choice became real. I gathered my son, who was blissfully unaware of the turmoil, and with one last look at the family home, I stepped into the unknown. Tom watched us go, sorrow and resignation in his eyes. His voice, once so familiar, seemed distant as he whispered a quiet goodbye. Linda, on the other hand, faced a much harsher reality. The family she had controlled for so long now turned their backs on her. Each member felt betrayed and had to face the trust they had misplaced. Linda was blamed for tearing the family apart, and her attempts to regain control were ignored. The evidence and the testimonies shared at the gathering were too powerful to dismiss. In the weeks that followed, Tom tried to reach out. His messages were a mix of apologies, pleas for forgiveness, and promises to change, but the memory of him raising his hand against me was too strong to forget. The echo of Tom's mother's influence and his actions created barriers too big to overcome. The trust was broken, and with it, the foundation of our marriage. I found refuge in a small apartment, far from the neighborhood I once called home, a place where no one knew my story. Jessica remained my rock, helping me through this new phase of life. My days became focused on simple routines, caring for my son and rebuilding a safe world away from the shadows of the past. Healing was slow and often painful. Some days, the weight of everything felt too much to bear, but the freedom to make choices without fear of manipulation or abuse pushed me forward. I went to therapy, joined support groups for single mothers, and slowly, the broken pieces of my old self came together into someone stronger and more resilient. My son's laughter became my anchor. Each milestone he reached was a bright moment, guiding me forward. As he grew, so did my confidence in the future, one that I was now shaping on my own terms. Months passed, and one evening, as I put my son to bed in our cozy apartment filled with drawings and toys, I reflected on the journey. The pain of the past was still there, but it was overshadowed by the light of new beginnings. The support of friends and my son's unconditional love had created a safety net that caught me on difficult days. Sitting down with a cup of tea, I finally felt ready to share my story. I started a blog, a place to talk about my experiences and connect with others who might be dealing with manipulation or abuse. With each post, I stepped further away from being a victim and closer to becoming an advocate. As our story of resilience comes to a close, I want to leave you with a question. Do you think it's possible to fully break free from manipulative family dynamics, or do the shadows of those relationships follow us forever? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content on real-life issues. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to light. Thank you for watching, and let's keep the conversation going.
Since Michael and Sarah returned for a hometown childbirth, please leave. My mother-in-law stated in a chilly voice. Her eldest son and his wife are due in 3 days. Me leave? I asked, confused and stunned. Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while now. Michael and his family will be living here, so make sure you're out by tomorrow, she continued. I knew I was never truly accepted into the family since the day I got married. Treated as a wife, never did I imagine they would tell me to leave. You barren failure, you were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. What's Simon to? I gulped down my saliva. If it's not a conspiracy between my mother-in-law and Michael, then I don't need to stand in ceremony with my husband anymore. Foolish to drive me out, but it was my mother-in-law who ignited this. What happens to this house now is none of my concern. May they face the reality they have ignored squarely. Personally, I'm Anna Thompson, 45 years old, living with my husband and mother-in-law in a popular area close to the station. The access to the city center is superb. When house hunting, my picky husband, recently promoted to a managerial position, insisted on a spacious apartment. The rent was steep, but the space and rooms made it worth the stretch. My husband, Simon, 8 years my senior, a divorce I met through a friend's introduction. Comforted by the enveloping kindness unique to an older man, we decided to get married after 2 years of dating. Even when I told him about my infertility due to past illness, his affection did not waver. Likewise, my feelings remained unchanged when I learned of the circumstances he carried. My husband had a son named Michael from his previous marriage. I'm truly sorry to ask you, who have never been married, to live with my parents and son. I won't make you suffer. I'll ensure you're happy. That was the promise he made to me. To prevent me from feeling suffocated, my husband suggested moving to a spacious apartment where I could have my own room. Michael, turning 10 this year, won't need much care with my mom around. You don't have to push yourself. After his divorce, my husband got help with childcare from his parents at their home. A few years later, Simon's father passed away in an accident, and it seems his mother took over as Michael's caretaker. From the first meeting, Michael wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I thought it might be his shy nature, approaching a difficult age, so I didn't worry. As long as they accepted me as a member of the household, I was content. My mother-in-law was a quiet and refined person. When I visited to formally introduce myself after our engagement, she treated me with such politeness that I thought we would get along fine living together. I'll continue to prepare the meals as I have been. Simon comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Anna? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. All right, let's work well together. After getting married, I switched from a full-time employee at the pharmacy to a part-timer due to the division of household chores. I started work a bit later in the morning, so I wouldn't get home until nearly 8 p.m. Dinner was always ready when I arrived, making me feel good about living together. My mother-in-law and Michael usually had dinner before I got home, so I was always eating alone. Even after getting married, I sometimes felt a sense of, is this it? But I came to accept that this was our family style. From the beginning, my mother-in-law never really liked me and didn't consider me part of the family at all. Michael, the school's activity day is before summer, right? When is it? We're all going to see you. Sometime after getting married, I tried to break the ice with Michael, who still hadn't warmed up to me. No, as Michael faltered, my mother-in-law interjected, "We'll go there, just Simon and me. Anna, you don't need to worry about it." I misunderstood her words, thinking she was just being considerate. "I can get the day off work. Let's all go together." "You don't need that. You're Simon's wife. And mixed family has always been just Simon and me." I was quite shocked when I brought it up with my husband at night. He said, "Mom's been clinging to Michael. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her eventually." I began to join as a mother at the activity day, but Michael and I rarely spent any time together outside of school events. Sometimes I could tell Michael wanted to say something, but my mother-in-law always cut in between us. I later found out that she had been bad-mouthing me to Michael. Anna said she could be happy with Simon if Michael weren't around. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too. If a boy in his formative years hears such things, it wouldn't be strange for him to distrust me. It was a sickening story, but at that time, I hadn't imagined that my mother-in-law could do such a thing. After graduating high school, Michael immediately moved in with his girlfriend and left home. As soon as he started college, a year after he started working, he married her without a ceremony. Once Michael moved out, my mother-in-law surprisingly stopped doing housework altogether. Instead, it seemed that picking on me had become her sole entertainment. She stopped cooking, which she used to do before, and now just sits at the dining table waiting for me to come home. Without a moment to sit down, I would stand in the kitchen and prepare dinner. "You're really inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night." I was never good at cooking, partly because I had always relied on my mother-in-law to prepare the meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she would taste each dish and invariably complain, "This tastes awful. I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. You're astonishingly tone-deaf when it comes to flavors, Anna. It's a good thing Michael never had to eat this." How terrible. If she thought so, she might as well make it herself, but it seemed she just wanted to complain to me, not just about the meals, but she started nitpicking everything from the cleaning I never used to do to the laundry. "Why are there so many wrinkles on the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything?" With that, my mother-in-law sighed while looking at me being belittled. Even about my family, I clenched my fists in frustration. "I don't know how you won over Simon, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman." And she always concluded with the same line, "If you hadn't come, Michael would have never left." I understood that there was a gaping hole in her heart since Michael had left. Maybe it was what they call empty nest syndrome. If taking it out on me made her feel better, that's what I told myself to endure it. But her bullying took on new energy after a certain event. That event was the pregnancy announcement for Michael's wife, Sarah. The joy my mother-in-law exhibited was unlike anything I had seen before. "It's Michael's baby. It's bound to be adorable. Yeah, he'll be my first grandchild." Watching the two of them rejoice, I was happy too. But my mother-in-law's excitement was beyond normal, probably because Michael asked her, "Grandma, can Sarah have our baby at your place?" Sarah's family home is an hour away by plane, and since they have no one else to rely on here, they turned to us for help. Of course, my mother-in-law wouldn't dream of turning down Michael's request. The phone calls from Michael started to become frequent, and her excitement went through the roof. The next day after getting the news, she started preparing enthusiastically. From cleaning out Michael's room to preparing the bedding and making a list of baby items, it was like she had great-grandchild fever. Naturally, I had to get involved too. When I returned from work, I vacuumed Michael's room. So you need to wipe the floors and the windows and please wax them too. This weekend we're going to the department store to look at baby cribs. Cleaning and waxing at night was tough, especially after a long day at work. If I even thought about cutting corners, I'd be told to do it over again. Moreover, my mother-in-law started asking for money, and before I knew it, the house was overflowing with baby stuff. Anna, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are things I want to get ready for the baby again. Isn't it wasteful to prepare so much when Sarah and Michael haven't even arrived? Shouldn't we wait and choose together with them? I had wanted to meet my mother-in-law's requests, but I was troubled by the relentless spending. How can you be so cold? It's Simon's grandchild. Oh, that's right. You're not related to Michael by blood. You don't care, do you? That's not true. Please don't say that. I just thought Sarah might want to pick things out herself. When do you want to choose things for your own child? Perhaps because I was making a valid point, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply. I immediately thought I had gone too far, but it was too late. Without a word, my mother-in-law went back to her room looking upset. I did reflect on it, but I was also shocked to be spoken about in such a way regarding Michael. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't come out of her room, perhaps still angry. Simon had a 3-day business trip starting that day, so he just called out, "I'm leaving," through her door. Please don't throw cold water on Mom's great-grandchild fever. She hasn't been the same since Michael left. You were worried too, right? I was. But if we spend all our money like this, we'll have nothing left when Michael and Sarah arrive, right? Simon's face immediately turned sour. Are you saying my earnings are too low? That's not what I'm saying at all, Simon just said, fine, and left with a look of dissatisfaction. Discussions about money always end up like this. Since I'm the one managing our finances, I can't help but think ahead. Of course, there's a reason for that. We've been married for 13 years. Simon has provided me with a very comfortable life. Your part-time income is for you to enjoy. Simon had always told me so. I saved everything beyond what I needed for myself. Even though it's in my name, I consider it our shared property. But then Simon's company's performance declined, and over the last 5 years, his salary has dropped to 2/3 of what it was when we first got married. While there's uncertainty whether his company will last until his retirement, he doesn't seem to consider changing jobs. For appearances in front of my mother-in-law, my husband couldn't give up his title as a department head. Now I'm the one paying the rent, and he covers the living expenses. We've kept this from my mother-in-law to save my husband's face. That day, I left work a bit early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I got home, she was already sitting at the dining table waiting for me. I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have gone too far, I admitted, but my mother-in-law remained silent. Instead, she blindsided me with unexpected news. Michael and Sarah are returning for a hometown childbirth. Please vacate, my mother-in-law declared in a chilly tone. The eldest son and his wife were set to arrive in 3 days. Perplexed and stunned, I asked, I have to leave. She affirmed, yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while. Michael and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow. The realization hit me hard. I had never truly been accepted into the family since the day I got married. I had always been treated as an outsider. The news of Michael's return for the birth made it clear. You barren failure. My mother-in-law continued. You are allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now. Shocked, I gulped down my saliva, contemplating the possibility of my relationship with my husband growing distant. Could this be a trap I fell into, thinking my husband would never? I remembered that, up until a year ago, He never had overnight business trips. "All right, I'll eat out tonight," I said, grabbing my bag and leaving the house to walk aimlessly. I needed to calm my severely shaken heart. Worried about my husband, I tried calling his cell phone despite my mother-in-law's words. I still wanted to talk to him, but he didn't answer, no matter how many times I rang. I dialed his office, only to learn that he had taken a couple of days off. My mother-in-law's words began to ring more true. Could he really be on a trip with another woman? Dark thoughts crowded my mind, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down my face. Staggering along, I noticed the tavern behind the station, a place we used to frequent when we first moved here. "It's still here," I thought as I entered. "Welcome." The tavern owner's expression clouded briefly upon seeing me. Then he nodded in recognition. "Hey, long time no see. It's been about 8 years. I used to come here a lot with my husband," I said. "Yes, it's been a while." "I remember you," he replied. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of grilled chicken, please?" I asked. The owner, a man of few words as always, nodded. As I sipped the cold beer and savored the grilled chicken, I took out my cell phone, and the screensaver lit up with a photo of us when Michael turned 18. Looking sharp in the slim suit we had picked out together, I wished for us to be closer as a family. The beer washed down my throat, taking the day's fatigue with it. Could I really move out tomorrow? Contemplating the next steps, I searched for moving companies, finding one for the job the next day. I also looked up junk buyers and saved 2 companies in my favorites. Changing the screensaver on my phone seemed to clear my head completely. The beer and grilled chicken tasted exceptional. I decided to think about everything once I got home. Walking away from the tavern, I was called from behind. A young waitress from the tavern was running towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Thompson? I noticed the screensaver on your phone," she said. Confirming my identity, she dropped a bombshell. My husband was having an affair with one of their employees. We exchanged contact information, and she promised to keep me informed. My mother-in-law's words appeared to be true. Instead of sadness, a fierce anger welled up within me. It was time to confront this head-on. Booking an appointment with a moving company, I resolved to move out that day. If it wasn't a conspiracy, and my mother-in-law and Michael were truly involved, then I no longer needed to honor my husband. Returning home, I packed my belongings until midnight. Without hesitation, the moving company arrived on time, and I made it clear that I was leaving. As requested, they took everything I had bought, erasing every trace of my presence. My mother-in-law panicked, but I was resolute. "I'm taking everything I bought. You can start a completely new life tomorrow," I declared, suppressing a laugh. Ignoring her protests, I proceeded to have everything taken out. My mother-in-law complained loudly to the movers, but there was nothing she could do. The only items left in the house were piles of baby gear and her old dresser from before the marriage. "Well then, I bid you farewell. There should be no trace of me left, so enjoy your life with Simon, Michael, and his family," I declared, leaving her sitting there stunned. Placing the keys on the table, I exited the room. The movers held onto my things for a while, and I decided to stay with a single colleague for some time. Feeling a sense of completion, I slept soundly that night. A week later, I finally heard from my husband. I wondered if he was scheming with that other woman. While my husband was dragging his feet, I received a call from the young woman at the tavern. "Got a good shot, so I'll send it to you." In the photo, my husband was chatting up a not-so-young woman at the tavern. Maybe out of a sense of justice, the young woman must have followed them after they closed. There was also a photo attached of the two entering a hotel. Even in such times, the cheating continues, I thought, and any last bit of affection I had for my husband dissipated. I asked for the woman's name and had her address looked up. The next day, armed with all the evidence of the affair, my husband called. "Anna, where are you? Michael and his family are here too. Aren't you going to come home soon?" "No, I'm not coming back. Your mom told me to leave. I'm done here. Michael and his family are going to live with you now, right?" I knew it. Michael and his family were out of money and looking to crash at our place. I heard that after graduating from a vocational school, they'd been hopping from job to job, and now they're working part-time. No. I want you back, Anna. I went to the pharmacy, and they said you're off for a bit. Got a place to crash. Yeah, I'm fine. So don't worry about me. Your mom and Michael didn't like me, right? I reckon they're happy to have the place to themselves without me around. My snide comment left my husband speechless. He knew his mother and Michael never accepted me as family, but pretended not to see it. Well, all right. I have something to say, so I'll come back there once. My husband replied with a relieved please in his voice. Days later, I returned to the house for the first time in a long while. Some new pieces of furniture and appliances were inside. When Michael and Sarah saw me, they just nodded from their seats on the sofa without getting up. As I took a seat, my mother-in-law glared at me with a scary look on her face. The atmosphere was tense, and just as I thought to get things done and leave quickly, Michael spoke up. What are you doing here? You took everything from the house. What kind of monster does that? Dad's been supporting you, and you've had it easy. I sighed. I took everything because I paid for it. I wanted to remove all traces of me, just as you wanted, right? That's crazy, right? There's no way you could afford all that just working part-time at the pharmacy, my husband said. When I glanced at him, he started talking as if he'd resigned himself. We've been getting by on what Anna and I both make for a little while now. Then the stuff you took should be both yours. Instead of my speechless husband, I decided to speak up. Simon's company has been doing poorly, and his salary plummeted. That's why, for the past 5 years, I've been covering what's missing. But that wasn't enough, and now I'm the one paying our rent. My mother-in-law looked at my husband with surprise. I'm not just a part-timer, I'm a part-time pharmacist, and the pay is quite good. I'm making more than Simon now. At my words, my husband awkwardly looked away. My mother-in-law's eyes were frantically shifting between my husband and me. From now on, Michael, you'll be paying the rent. You're going to live here, right? After all the help your gran was given, it's time for you to take care of her. Michael looked at me with a shocked expression. When I dropped the news suddenly, rent? How much is it? He asked. It's $5,600. Good luck, since it seems my role as a mother is over. I don't have an obligation to take care of you anymore. Pull yourself together. You're going to be a father soon. Michael murmured with a shake of his head, that's impossible. It was Sarah who raised her voice upon hearing this. Wait, $5,600? Weren't we supposed to live here for free, covering rent and living expenses? I almost burst out laughing. Don't worry, Sarah. You can move to a cheaper place. Simon still makes a decent salary. Hearing this, Sarah's face relaxed a bit. Oh, since I'll be leaving you, Simon, life might still get tough with your mistress, huh? At that, Sarah finally broke down in tears. It was my husband who panicked. What? What are you talking about? Sarah replied, Oh, your mother told me about the new woman. I guess it's time to end my role as a wife too. My husband must think there's no evidence. Indeed, it hasn't even been 10 days since I left the house. Wouldn't that hurt Mary if she heard you? Well, I'll get in touch about that later. At the mention of Mary's name, my husband jolted, realizing that I knew everything. He held his head inside. This is not the atmosphere to write a divorce paper. Well then, I'll be going now. Please talk to me further through a lawyer. Neither my husband Simon nor Michael said anything more, staying silent as I grabbed my bag and stood up. My mother-in-law stood up simultaneously, slamming her hands on the table. She yelled with a voice too strong for an elderly woman. What the hell? It's all your fault our home is in shambles. I was instantly irritated. It was you who told me to leave. It was you who said Simon had another woman. And you interfered with my relationship with Michael. Everything was you. I felt a surge of heat in my chest. I regretted not being more assertive with my relationship with Michael, not holding back because of my mother-in-law. Michael has nothing to do with this. It's time for you to step up, Simon. He's going through a hard time. You should support him as his wife. Take responsibility as a family member. What is she even talking about? If she hadn't called Michael back home, if she hadn't hinted at Simon's affair, I would still happily support Simon and this home I always believed in and supported. Simon, where are you? Michael, why are you still here? It's all her fault. My mother-in-law's lips tightened into a line, and she was trembling. I slipped past the silent mother-in-law and quickly left the room. Afterward, Simon agreed to the divorce rather easily. It seems my determination was strong, and he couldn't counter the evidence of the affair. Shortly after, it seemed like they started the process of moving out of the apartment. In the end, Michael and Sarah went back to their apartment and never lived with the mother-in-law. Simon seems to be considering remarriage, but Mary was furious over the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I've heard they're considering whether to place my mother-in-law in a care facility. After all the love she poured into her son and grandson, it's somewhat sad to think they're ready to abandon her now. Perhaps she's served her purpose too. If my mother-in-law had said nothing back then, and it had just been a simple trip home for childbirth, maybe we would still be living together. After the divorce, Michael sent me an apology letter. He wrote about how, as a child, he really wanted to be more spoiled, how he couldn't talk to me because his grandma disliked it, and how happy he was when I attended school events. Maybe I should have reached out more. Perhaps then, we could have built a different relationship. Even though our relationship has ended, I quietly pray for Michael's happiness in life. I've returned to work as a pharmacist and quickly rented an apartment close to my workplace. I don't feel good about keeping the furniture and appliances I took with me, so I had them all picked up and disposed of by a junk removal service. Life without my mother-in-law's harassment is peaceful and comfortable. For a while, I want to live for my own happiness, not someone else's. Ivo by Emily, aged 35, and for the past decade, I've dedicated myself to homemaking. My spouse, Michael, a doctor, and I have been leading a reasonably content life despite not having children. However, an unexpected event disrupted our 10-year marital journey. One evening, as Michael arrived home late, he dropped a bombshell. "This is the end for us, Emily," he declared abruptly. Bewildered, I questioned him. "What do you mean by the end? What's suddenly happening?" "I've decided to marry my mistress, so we're getting divorced today," he declared nonchalantly. "Marry your mistress? What are you talking about?" "I've made up my mind. I'm leaving you and marrying her. Besides, we didn't marry for love, so you probably don't care, right?" Michael explained callously. Indeed, ours wasn't a love match. Michael's parents had orchestrated our union, and we barely knew each other before tying the knot hastily. The only commonality we shared was our original last name, a coincidence that seemed like fate during the rush of surrounding weddings. As we navigated through our wedding and marriage, I never fathomed that we would part ways after a decade. Despite lacking the foundation of a love marriage, we had lived together for 10 years. Now Michael wanted to marry someone else. It wasn't a love marriage, but we've lived together for 10 years, and now you suddenly want to marry your mistress. When did you start betraying me? I confronted him, grappling with the revelation. It's not betrayal. I met her about a year ago. She's a nurse who joined our hospital. She's charming, unlike you, always caring for me. And it's natural that I was drawn to her, Michael explained, justifying his decision. Natural. Are you serious? I responded, stunned by his revelation. Yes, I've always been serious. These 10 years living with you have been true hell. I was honestly sick and tired of supporting such a boring woman. But that ends today, he asserted coldly. How can you talk like that? It's the truth. You're a homemaker who produces nothing, while she's an active nurse. Ask any man in the country, they'd all choose her over you. Do you think a high-achieving doctor like me needs someone like you? Michael continued, his words cutting through me. After a brief pause, I mustered the strength to respond, "Fine, let's divorce." I never thought I'd be married to someone who could say such things so calmly. We can discuss alimony and property division later with a lawyer. I'll sign the divorce papers and send them later. Until then, I'll go back to my parents' house." However, Michael interrupted, revealing a shocking truth. "No need for discussions. We don't even need a divorce paper." Perplexed, I questioned him. "What do you mean? We can't separate without it. If we don't divorce, you can't remarry." "You're so naive. It's pathetic. The truth is, I never submitted our marriage registration. We're not a married couple, just cohabitants. So there's no divorce, no alimony, no property division. You thought you'd get my money in the divorce, but you won't get a penny," Michael disclosed. Shocked by this revelation, I confronted him. "Not submitted? Wait, are you joking? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. It's impossible that you didn't submit it." "Normally, yes. That's why I made that rule at the beginning. If you went to the office, everything would be ruined. When we got married, we made some rules. I, as a homemaker, would handle all the household chores. I was on an allowance, and part-time work was prohibited. Michael would handle all governmental and official matters," I recounted. "Why would you do such a thing?" I questioned. "Because I was about to be forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love. It's not like I was going to submit it easily. I was saving marriage for someone I was destined to be with," Michael explained. "Why didn't you refuse the marriage proposal in the first place?" I demanded. "I couldn't refuse. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. I wanted a housekeeper. I'm a busy doctor and can't often tend to household chores. So, I decided to marry you as a housekeeper. It was a good deal for you too, right? You could eat well and have a roof over your head without working. You seemed desperate to get married too. What, you were probably feeling pressured because your friends were getting married, right? Even though we weren't actually married, you were seen as the woman who married a doctor. This 10-year relationship was a win-win for both of us, and it ends today. You should be grateful for the good times you had. Now you have to live on your own without relying on others," Michael declared, concluding our tumultuous chapter. "I can't believe this. Oh, and one more thing. Don't tell my parents about this. If you do anything unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father, right? My father, who runs a medical equipment sales company, has a contract with the hospital where he works. It was through my marriage to him that this connection was made. If I told my in-laws, he's implying that he'd sever the contract as a threat. In other words, he's warning me not to take any action. It's your fault for being deceived. How pitiful to be thrown out with nothing," he said, laughing. But the one who would be thrown out without knowing anything was actually him. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What's so funny all of a sudden? I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge," he questioned. "I knew all along about your mistress and that you didn't submit our marriage registration," I replied calmly. "That's impossible," he insisted. "That's why I've been preparing, waiting for the day you'd bring it up yourself. In fact, I had suspected his infidelity for the past 6 months, but I didn't have enough evidence to confront him. So I hired a private investigator to look into his affair. Ma'am, there are 2 things I need to tell you. The first is that your husband is indeed having an affair. We got evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace, and the second is from their conversations. There's a possibility that you two are not legally married." "Possibility of not being legally married? What does that mean?" I asked, shocked. "I overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe. He said they didn't need to worry about alimony or property division since they never submitted a marriage registration," the investigator revealed. I can't believe it. We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. I don't know why he didn't submit the marriage registration. That's why he never let me handle any official procedures, I realized. "Yeah, that seems to be the case. I can't believe this. How could this happen?" I explained. "It's rare to hear about not submitting a marriage registration for 10 years, but it's not unheard of. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? If we were never married from the start, there's nothing I can do," I lamented. Not necessarily. What do you mean? The investigator asked. Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing, I declared. And so, I began to prepare with the investigator to punish my husband. So what if you knew we were never married from the start? So it doesn't matter what I do with other women. I don't need to take any responsibility, he said, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. I pitied myself for not knowing anything. But it seems you were the one truly pitiful. What do you mean? We're considered to be in a common law relationship on paper. So what? You might not know, but you can actually claim alimony and divide property in a common law relationship. What he didn't know was that registering as a de facto marriage would backfire on him. You can make claims in a common law relationship. It's not well known, but yes, you can. Of course, there are some conditions, but looking at your case, it seems you meet them. What are these conditions? A common law relationship is established based on 2 criteria. First, both parties must have the intention to marry. If it's just living together, that's cohabitation. Mutual intent to marry is key. For instance, if you had a wedding ceremony or were recognized as a couple by others, it can be acknowledged. We've had a wedding ceremony, and our parents and friends know us as a couple. Then the first criterion is met. The second is living as if married. This includes sharing household life for over 3 years. You've been living together as a couple for over 10 years, and as a homemaker, you obviously shared the household finances. This is recognized as a marital relationship. So that means if you can provide proof of what we discussed, you can claim alimony and divide property. I'm not an expert in this area, so I'll introduce you to a lawyer. You can work with them to bring him down. After consulting with the lawyer, I was told that I could indeed claim alimony and property division from my husband. So I'm going to demand alimony and property division from you, I informed my husband, who turned pale. His confidence, which had looked down on me just a moment ago, was gone. But even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman. Do you plan to rely on your parents after being kicked out? He scoffed. Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month. I've also got my eye on a new place. Don't worry about me, I responded confidently. What he thought, that a clueless homemaker would be helpless, had backfired. I'll make sure to discuss this with your parents, just so you know. Do you not care what happens to your father if they want to break the contract? He challenged. Let them. Sure, you were the link to the hospital, but the contract continued because of my father and his company's efforts. Whether or not they keep the contract is up to them. Let's see if they'll break a contract just because the doctor's wife of 10 years was a lie. Try saying that to my father and me. We won't be affected if the contract is broken over this. It only shows the depth of their trust. We'll just find another hospital to partner with, I asserted. Saying this, I took out my phone. You're not calling your parents, are you? He questioned. That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married. It's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending, I stated. To my surprise, my husband began to apologize. Please let me talk to them. Don't call, he pleaded. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, I'm done, he explained. What does that have to do with me? You're asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict. Are you kidding? You could have refused the marriage from the start if you didn't intend to marry. After 10 years of a selfish marriage, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story, I retorted. But I can't accept your story. I'll make sure to tell both your parents and mine, I declared. And so, I called both sets of parents. All 4 were shocked upon hearing my story, and a meeting was promptly arranged at our house. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son, my father scolded. It's true. I didn't submit it. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you think about how Emily would feel? My mother added. I had no choice. No choice, you say? How can you even say that? It's actually your fault, Dad and Mom. I didn't want to get married, yet you started looking for a bride on your own, saying it was time, he explained. I got married because you arranged meetings and tried to force a marriage on me. You're the one who agreed to the marriage, aren't you? I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have made a fuss about it, so I decided to get married. If you were resolved to marry, why didn't you submit the marriage registration? I read about a man on the internet who was in the same situation. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived a married life without submitting the registration, then revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's appalling. And what happened to that guy in the end, he asked. He's now married to the person he loves and has a real marriage. So I too will marry my girlfriend and have a real marriage. Then my parents, who had been silent until now, spoke up after hearing his reasoning. A real marriage, huh? Sure, you might not have had a love marriage, but do you remember what you said at the wedding? We will never forget to care for each other and build a home full of smiles. What did those words mean to you? What were we shown? We sent our daughter to you hoping for her happiness, but you deceived her for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. Did you build a home full of smiles? Now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without a shred of care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? Well, he began, but my father-in-law interrupted. I was happy you married our daughter, not just because you were a doctor. I thought she could build a happy home with someone as sincere as you. But it seems we were mistaken and deceived. And you threatened our daughter. If she told us about this, you'd cut off the contract with our company. Seriously. If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll cut off the contract ourselves. Be warned, we will tell the truth when asked. Why? If you do that, there will be rumors at the hospital. Well, yes, but that's the result of your own actions. You were the one who threatened us with cutting off the contract. My husband was in complete panic at this unexpected turn of events. Please wait. This is getting out of hand. Let's just talk, he pleaded. At that moment, my father-in-law grabbed him by the collar, furious. Don't mess with us. We didn't raise you to be such a scoundrel. What were you thinking, father? Please stop. By not submitting the marriage registration, you might have thought you were doing yourself a favor. But because of your selfish actions, Emily was strung along for 10 years. What were you thinking, causing such trouble to others? The living room fell silent. My husband, faced with my father-in-law's words, had nothing more to say. Emily and your parents, I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot, my father-in-law said. No, you parents shouldn't apologize. It's not your fault. However, it's partly our responsibility as parents for letting him act this way. For now, we'll take him home and make sure he doesn't continue his reckless behavior. We'll deal with the aftermath properly. We're very sorry for all this. And with that, my husband was taken away by his parents back to his childhood home. You've been through a lot. For now, you should come back home and rest. We'll think about what to do next later. You don't need to worry about anything right now, my parents said, thinking I was completely exhausted and deceived. They spoke to me with such kindness. Thank you, but I won't go back home yet. I still have things I need to do. I declined their offer and stayed in my own home. What I had to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband. Gathering evidence for our common law relationship, I was getting ready to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, a meeting with a lawyer was arranged. However, even if I agree with alimony, why should I divide my property? She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never working a day. All the furniture, clothes, food. I paid for everything. Now you're telling me to hand over the money I worked hard for, the furniture I bought. He ranted, unable to accept that his money would be shared with me. Yes, that's correct. The money you earned and the furniture are subject to property division, the lawyer explained. Why does it have to be like that? He protested. Who did the housework? While you were working, who cooked meals with the groceries you bought? That's irrelevant now. No, it's very relevant. A homemaker is entitled to property division because housework and child care have economic value. Speaking as a human, not just a lawyer, do you think housework is something anyone can do, that it's just expected of a homemaker? The reason you could live freely is because of her support. Don't get that wrong. And this situation is a result of your actions, yet you have the audacity to be selfish, the lawyer continued. What'd you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of the assets for property division. That's how it is. Dan, regarding alimony, we intend to claim $100,000 from you. $100,000? Why so much for a relationship that wasn't even a marriage? It's precisely because you weren't married. Normally, alimony claims in common law relationships range from $10,000 to $40,000. However, in your case, you pretended to be married for 10 years and selfishly tried to kick her out when you found someone else. The amount is determined by the severity and duration of your actions. But still, you may think 10 years is just a short time, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she devoted herself to you, believing you were a married couple. You have no right to complain after betraying her. A perfect rebuttal left him speechless, and he reluctantly agreed to my demands. Then I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress. I knew who and where she was, thanks to the investigator, as she was a nurse working at the same hospital. The mistress, having heard from him that there was no possibility of alimony or property division, must have been utterly shocked by the contents of the claim. Wait a minute, this isn't what you told me. What you want? She confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. I told you not to talk to me at the hospital. I got this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't married. What's this all about? I later learned that, in a panic after being served with the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. Okay. Let's talk about this later, not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this turns into a rumor. I don't care about that. I can't pay this kind of alimony. You said it was okay, so you should pay. Pay it for me. I won't pay a penny. You were the one who wanted this relationship. You said I was the only one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, quiet down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not in the wrong here. If you want to make amends with your wife, do it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her a penny, that you'll take care of everything. This exchange led to the revelation of their affair to the entire hospital. It quickly became the talk of the place, and then the final blow was my father's request to the hospital. I apologize, but we would like to terminate our contract at the end of next month. The hospital, aware of the rumors, asked my father, "Excuse me for asking, but is the reason for canceling the contract related to Dr. Michael's affair? It's already become a rumor." Yes, a nurse presumed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined he had been pretending to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. I never expected it to turn out like this. You mean he never submitted the registration? Weren't you aware that he hadn't submitted the marriage registration? All we knew was that he, being married, had an affair. What do you mean he didn't submit the marriage registration? With my father's request, it was revealed that he had been deceiving me for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. This news spread among the other nurses. Dr. Michael deceived his wife for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration, and he had an affair with a nurse. How low? How could he do that? Can someone really not notice for 10 years? Apparently, Emily's maiden name was the same, and he managed all the official paperwork. That's scary. The rumors spread not only among hospital staff, but also to patients, and both Michael and his mistress received cold stares. Unable to endure, they soon resigned from the hospital. As my father told me, "Did you manage to get the alimony?" Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress. She refused to pay until the end, claiming she was deceived, but the lawyer made it clear her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about you, Dad? Did the contract get canceled after all? No, that's off the table. He resigned, and since our company is trusted, the hospital asked us not to cancel the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. Then I started a new life in a new place and was living happily. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband contacted me. Is it true you got remarried? I had married a man I met at work, and somehow he had found out. I wondered whose number this was, going through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes, I got married. You betrayed me. Betray. We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you. Right? That's a different matter indeed. Things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you. Is that why you contacted me? After I said this, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he taunted. Of course, you're still unmarried, since you probably haven't submitted a marriage registration again. You're that kind of woman. But things weren't as he imagined. Unfortunately for you, my husband isn't the kind of person to do such terrible things. He knows all about your story, so to ensure I wouldn't feel anxious, we went to the office together to submit the registration. Sadly for you, things aren't as you thought. I can somewhat understand your wish for me to be unhappy. Considering your own misery, but sorry you're happily married. I told him this and hung up the phone. What kind of life he leads now, I don't know. But unless he changes his selfish nature, it's unlikely